Content warning. This podcast contains bones, blood, smut, and swear words.
Act 1. Welcome, penitents. Hello and welcome to the Frontline Fifth, a Locked Tomb podcast where brand spanking new novitiates explore the Locked Tomb series for the first time, while a couple of dried-out bone witches cackle over how little they really know. We're currently reading Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, and this week we are taking a 5-minute breather between duels to chat about chapters 9, 10, and 11. My name is Hannah, and I am proudly undefeated, always defeated in 3 moves, but please allow me to introduce my co-host, whose prowess with the sword is only matched by her incredible wit and sense of style. It's Marie. Marie, what is the dumbest thing you've ever done to impress a ludicrously hot person?
The first thing that comes to mind is church camp, going mud wrestling.
Wait.
I mean, I think we've all been mud wrestling at church camp, so I get it.
I have lots of questions, but we don't have enough time. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to leave it there. It's better out of context.
Well, I'm going to need you to up your standards just a little bit, Marie, and I am sorry that our youth had to hear that, but I am pleased as punch to introduce a couple of 4th house teens whose impressive swordplay is only very slightly diminished by the intense onslaught of puberty. It's our newbies, John and Brooke. John, what nonsense have you attempted for someone as hot as Corona Beth Tridentarius?
I've done unspeakable shenanigans to land my wife, and I will continue doing so moving forward.
Okay, and Brooke, what dumb shenanigans have you pulled just because a hottie looked your way?
I think probably I have, unironically tried to pop, lock, and drop it.
Who hasn't?
This is also a completely, nonsensical, facetious question because we are all the hotties that other people are performing for, and I think we all know that. All right, well, before we get back to wandering through the halls of Canaan House, aggressively not speaking to anybody, I'd like to take a quick moment to ask our dear hosts for their first impression of these 3 chapters. So is there anything you all want to point your sword at?
This was the first time when reading these chapters, because we are paced 2 to 3 chapters at a time. This is the first time that I was kind of pissed that I had to put the book down. Because up until this point, we had so much world building for the 9th. I basically took almost a studious approach to it of highlighting stuff as this is funny words. I had to look up all these terms about Roman churches. But now we have intrigue amongst people in this house. There's all these gloriously new strange people. And we have romance and sword fighting and brawling. It's so exciting. I want to keep going.
John, what you got?
Yeah, I think similarly, we've zoomed out so much that now what we're looking at is just so much broader. It was just a very intense Gideon and Harrow and just this planet. And now there's just so many more characters, so much more to do, and so much more to. Yeah, I'm in the same boat where it's just I was annoyed. I was all right, what's the next chapter? And I was nope, can't do that. No spoilers, no jumping ahead. We have a duty to this podcast. And I was equally annoyed.
I am so grateful to the 2 of you because I did not have to put it down the first time through. And so on this read through, something that I noticed because, I wasn't blasting through, just getting to the action and I'm pausing and paying attention, is it's really funny to think of Gideon as shy and a loner.
That is how they portrayed her.
That.
As somebody who is socially awkward.
It's so funny because it's the goth girl wandering through high school, not talking to anybody. She's just got the face paint on and the robes, and she's not talking to anybody. She's
and then
just
they ship her off to the dorms.
Okay, this is the thing is I am exactly the person who completely falls for this and finds this to be the coolest thing ever. Anyone who's not talking to me, I'm they are so cool. And the idea that they've just been sitting there freaking the fuck out behind their paint being it's cool, I'm fine. It's pretty comical. I love that Gideon never knew she was socially awkward because she's never, had people to talk to.
I love her.
I think my big takeaway from these chapters is that I fucking stan the 5th house. I do. Mm-hmm. I absolutely adore the 5th house mentality, and I cannot with Nibiria's turn.
Wait, So the fifth house is Magnus.
Yes.
And we've learned that
yes.
his necro is his wife, but we haven't met her. Is that right?
No, we have not met her yet, but we're going to get into all that.
Excellent.
As soon as we start exploring Canaan House's multiplicity of doors in episode 5, Alone Amid Very Strange Strangers. Act 2, Nowhere to Go and Nothing to Be.
Let's recap. Chapter 9. Harrowhark leaves Gideon a note. Or 2. Gideon meets the 4th and 5th. Gideon discovers a door. Gideon spies on the 3rd house. Chapter 10. Gideon meets a mayonnaise uncle. Dulcinea loves a captive audience. Chapter 11. Bronabeth organizes some sparring. Gideon shows her stuff. Nabirius is technically a sore winner.
All right, let's get into it. I do want to start with our Skull Watch. We can go through it chapter by chapter, but chapter 9 had a 3rd house skull. Chapter 10 had a 7th house skull. And chapter 11 had a 1st house skull. So maybe we'll kind of like try and remember to get back to that as we talk about it. In chapter 9, the first thing that happens is like Gideon is waking up, literally has been there for like less than 24 hours, right? Arrived, they had a tea party, they went to bed. Gideon wakes up and is exploring her surroundings only to find mostly that she is mummified in aggressive notes from Harrow. So, how did y'all feel about this?
It is so clearly, Harrow knows exactly how Gideon works. It's like the two of them are basically sisters, even though absolutely that is not how they would ever consider it. But the fact that Harrow knows exactly where to place things and when, because she knows exactly what Gideon's going to do when she wakes up. She knows exactly where she's going to go. She knows exactly what she's not going to do and therefore needs to be reminded to do. It's perfect.
I think it also demonstrates just how much energy and thought Harrow puts into things, because it's like, open the door, note there. You do something else, notes there. It's perfect. It's such good characterization for her too.
It is like an extra 40 miles of work.
Yes. Yeah. Like how much time did she spend this morning just writing notes and then writing second notes to amend the first note so that Gideon can't get out on a technicality?
Even down to anybody. She knew that she knew the technology. She thought back on it and she was like, anybody means any person, alive or dead.
What a planner.
So it's a long way to go for it. But we find actually that Gideon thought she would want to talk to everyone, but you're right, she is kind of shy. She's like never talked to anyone. So she heads off to breakfast and she encounters Magnus, who is the Cavalier of the 5th, and the 2 4th house teenagers who cannot contain their shit. Like, they are the least subtle people alive, but maybe all teenagers are the least subtle people alive.
I love the way it's written, no, Magnus.
But that's like the first time I've seen that style of like interjection and like simultaneous like writing. So like you have like the dialogue happening and then you have like basically like the almost like Shakespearean aside kind of things, but like happening. So it's like, let me step to the side of the stage and like give you a quick like
whiny
insert,
teens.
and then like, yeah, and then action continues over here. Yeah, it's a really interesting way to write it. I thought it was really hilarious. Yeah, and exactly. It's just a bunch of like angsty teenagers doing angsty teenager things.
I may like accost you with Moira Quirk's reading of this because she gives them French accents as well.
Oh no, she doesn't.
Yes, she does. And so Jean-Marie is like, no, Magnus, don't talk about me. No, Magnus. And like I have like done this to my children because like they've been in the car sometimes when I'm listening to them and like heard like the angsty teens. And so like there have been times when was like being slightly teenager and I would be like, no, don't talk about me. No, Mom, don't do this.
No, don't say we're overcome. And I really do have a lot of love for the 5th, but I like Magnus's dad energy and I like his generosity, because one of the things that I realize that you all immediately see Gideon as just kind of like this like angsty goth aesthetic, but if you do not live in a world where there are goths and you live in a world where there are really intense religious cults and you're just walking around and the first thing you see is this like skull painted, black clad head to toe the fucking aviators, you can't even see their eyes, and then they are silent. And I think that is so much creepier, is literally they're just like, you're talking to them dead-eyed, like no response. Fucking terrifying.
Right. And like he like puts out his hand to shake and she doesn't. She like pauses because she's like, what am I supposed to do? And he just
Oh my God. Marie's giving like the right faces with the whole face paint. It's incredible. I'm so sorry. This is a podcast. It doesn't really translate.
Was a professional.
So sorry.
therapist. Oh my God. Oh my God.
She goes, I was given 5 more minutes, so.
Oh my God.
Amazing.
Who are you? Put the sunglasses back on.
It is pretty horrible without the aviators. I would like to point out that I did this in about 5 minutes.
Really?
Because I refuse to believe that Gideon would take more than 5 minutes to do this.
No.
You can get this done in 5 minutes and be like,
And it was your first time. Okay.
It was my second time. Okay, second time.
I am legitimately impressed. I didn't know you were off doing that.
My shirt says doing my best.
This may be a cry for help, but this is where we're at. Okay, anyway.
She's got the sunglasses on, so when she stares at us with saying nothing, no smile, it is the look that Gideon is giving Magnus as he holds out his hand.
Oh yeah. But he's like, I just feel like he has class about this, right? And they head off, the 5th and the 4th head off, so Gideon's alone again, and she just basically goes on walkabout exploring Canaan House. I love this term, a multiplicity of doors, but it really is just like doors on doors on doors, passageways that lead to passageways, just kind of an infinite maze. And a lot of it is falling the fuck apart, right? Like at one point she even like puts her foot through like the floor. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about last week, that it's this beautiful place, but it is decrepit. It is kind of abandoned. And I think it's an interesting situation to be in. As she's exploring, she finds this kind of tiled vestibule. And one of the things she finds in that area is this weird little hallway that's hidden behind a tapestry and leads to this epically weird door. It has carved stone animals with crazy horns. It's described as like fat slithering creatures down the sides that have scales. So I was like, snakes, ? Does she know what snakes are? Are there other animals here? We have only ever seen humans. Like, no idea.
But they do reference meat.
But she doesn't know what the meat is.
That's true.
Flaky white thing.
It's been referenced that like she only references protein.
Yeah, like paste,
Yeah.
right? Like clearly we're in a Soylent world. Even use soap made of human fat.
Right. Oh, did we talk about her waking up and her experience with the bathroom?
I can't believe I left that out. You're absolutely right. I thought that was so funny.
The sonic cleaning! I want it so bad!
But also like her freaking out about the shower. She turned on the shower and she was like, ah!
She knew what the sink was and turned the water on in the sink and was like, let's turn that back off.
Right, and she didn't want to touch the soap because she knows what soap is.
There's a bathtub that she didn't understand what it was.
The tiled rectangle, that's your shower stall.
And it's probably like a normal sized bathroom, but to her, she's like, this is enormous.
I don't know, this is a bougie place. Maybe it is a giant bathroom.
Do you think a Sonic cleans hair well?
I mean, they all seem to have like short hair or shaved heads in the 9th. So I feel like maybe that's why you're like, we're not going to deal with this.
Yuck.
I think it's really funny. One of the things they mention is that the reason she knew what a sink was and knew that word was from her like comics. Yeah, but it also makes sense that you've only seen it drawn, and so you don't actually, like, she was not prepared for, like, the noise and sound and sudden water of it. She just knew.
The sensory experience of it.
Yeah, exactly.
But we're in a different tiled vestibule now, and it reminds me of the Chamber of Secrets. God.
Oh, yeah.
Does have Chamber of Secrets energy.
Even down to, like, snaky stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eerie lighting.
So this is the first door she encounters that is locked, right? And that is the only rule that we have from teacher is do not go through doors without permission.
Right. And she's like she's like trying to open it. And it's like
her first thought is trying to open it.
Well, to be fair, I think, John was basically saying if you unlock it, then it's no longer locked.
Disclaimer, we are not encouraging breaking and entering or anything else.
I am. All right, so she finds this mysterious locked door, and she goes ahead and does a very secretive, classic ninth thing that she's sort of ashamed of. She covers it up again, which I love.
My secret.
My locked door. And just then, the third come by. So both the twins and their cavalier, and Gideon kind of like lurks and spies on them. Nibirius, the cavalier, is bitching about absolutely everything, which is basically his main personality trait, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, not a fan.
He calls the whole thing mystical oblique claptrap and thinks it's all a conspiracy. He also threatens to like call their father, which I think is hysterical.
I pictured like tall, athletic Malfoy, basically. Wait until my father hears about this.
Yeah, that's good, that's good.
And the twins are talking too, right? The pale twin keeps like insulting her sister and calling her dumb and dim. And then Babs tries to defend her, and fucking both of the twins turn on him real hardcore.
That's freaky.
Yeah, what do you make of this?
This whole interaction.
Yeah, no, I think that's like, I think you've seen that before. It's like, oh, like two people can like knock on each other all they want, but then the second that there's an outside force that comes in to do it, it's like full defense mode.
Yeah, like I can bitch about my family. You cannot bitch about my family.
Yeah. Which is interesting because then later we learn that he's a prince. Does that not make him, I don't know how the systems work around here, but in normal monarchistic systems, that would make them siblings.
Equals. Or also like, aren't the calves, like it seems like the way that everybody else works or the way that the calves are supposed to work is like they're supposed to be pretty intensely like close relationships.
Yeah, it just also feels like they're supposed to be a little bit subservient, right? Like they're also like a follower, but it's supposed to be a very close relationship. And yeah, like how does that
Bodyguard.
work if your cav is also technically a like higher than you via royalty?
I'm with you 100%. Like, even just the structure of having the cavalier's bed be like this weird
Caught at the foot of the bed.
and that tells you right away, like, what the order of priority is. Yeah. All right, so before they leave, Ianthe, the pale twin, looks into the dark where Gideon's hiding and threatens her. She says, this is not a clever path to start down. You don't want to draw the attention of the third necromancer. Gideon's sort of having a day.
Yeah, I picked up on the fact that like necromancers can kind of probably pick up on signs of life, bodies.
Necromancers have dark vision.
Well, I think she could have been a little bit more explicit. I think, the intentionally vague way of saying this was like, all I can do is detect that there's somebody there.
Right. Like, does she know that it's Gideon? Is she like going to target Gideon, or is this just generally like, fuck you, whoever is hiding?
Can they sense bones? Yeah, like is that like how it works? Like they can just like feel the bones? Like, ooh, those bones are still in a sack of jelly. So like a live person over there.
So Gideon does what I do when I'm bored, which is to go for another meal. This is why I tend to have 8 to 9 meals a day on
I'm
weekends.
bored.
I guess I'll eat something. So Gideon heads off to lunch, right? I do want to point out something that, like, over the course of this chapter, it's emphasized a number of times how high quality the skeletal constructs in the House of the First are. And even like how Harrow is probably pissed about it because the ninth are supposed to be like the bone witches extraordinaire. But these are like beautiful, miraculous skeletal constructs. They're really, really impressive. And the skeletal constructs are all of the servants, right? They're like serving her food very carefully. As she's finishing up lunch, the 8th walk in. So the necromancer, who is also described as the mayonnaise uncle, gave her the impression of being the guy Fun sought out for death.
I fell on the ground.
When Fun is trying to die, hangs out with Silas Octakizaron.
I'm glad that I was right that all Silases are just assholes or like just bad people. I think I said that 1 or 2 episodes ago, and it seems like I was correct.
Yeah, I think that might actually just be true.
Apologies to any listeners whose names are Silas.
You know what? Listeners whose name are Silas, I will help you fill out the paperwork to change it. Don't you even worry.
Oh, no, we changed the messaging. Let's change the messaging. Let's write our own book.
Okay.
Silas is the main character, and he's awesome.
He's a good dude. Our Silas in this book is literally such a fucking prick that he doesn't like Gideon, but he won't even talk to her. He makes his cavalier tell her to leave, which is just so fucking...
And then the whole uncle dynamic of like clearly a young guy being uncle to a much older, bigger, more life experienced guy is super creepy.
Yeah. And also the way, I mean, they treat each other in that direction. Talk about treating your cav as subservient. Like he treats his nephew, who is older and bigger, and, you know, his cavalier, his partner, as just a servant immediately. It's pretty icky. And the cavalier actually is, so Column, I actually think, personally, does not get enough credit. The cavalier is pretty polite about a lot of things, even though he's of the 8th house, and the 8th are the fucking worst, based on literally this description alone. But the cavalier politely asks her to leave. My uncle can't eat with your kind around. And I'm sitting there being like, your kind?
Based on anything that you know about, like, what we've talked about, what the houses are about, like, what do you think this is about?
Well, it's interesting because the only things that I've seen so far, like we look at, because I was just looking back at this trying to figure out, is the 8th house is the forgiving house, and they don't seem very forgiving.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Like the antithesis.
Yeah.
No, I don't think we have a lot to go off of with the your kind comment. I mean, what we're left with is the idea, again, or just trying to reinforce the idea that they're these shadow cultists, right? Like that's what, like in my brain when I read your kind, I'm like, oh, this is this shadow cultist thing. It's an insult. It's people are scared of it or afraid of it, or
what is nodded to, like when they step off the thing, what's nodded to when you're describing the houses, what's nodded to, like right here, is that basically the keepers of like the religious aspect of this empire is the 8th, and the 9th are the keepers of the tomb, and they worship the tomb.
But it's like a mixed worship too, right? There's something like, may the tomb be locked forever. May the rock never be rolled away. So it's a worship of the thing that lives inside, but also in this like fearful way.
Yeah, and we have not really gotten exposed to any sort of like other alternative religion outside of like basically praise for the emperor.
I like the word phobic because that definitely feels like how the 8th responds to the 9th. It is this very visceral like ick and like distance that you want to keep. I just listened to episode 0 again. And so I want to bring up something that Brooke pointed out actually when we were looking through the Dramatis Personae, which is that houses 2 through 7 are all like a piece of the emperor's mouth, the emperor's, you know, joy, the emperor's whatever. And then the 8th and the 9th are kind of like tasks assigned by the emperor, keepers of things. So they do kind of have their own special field, which I think is really interesting.
And it appears to be antagonistic, although kind of on one-sided.
There's not a lot of history for the 9th to be retaining currently with between the 3 of them.
Right. For real. Gideon goes outside, escapes this conversation, this non-conversation, basically just leaves when told to. And she finds her way out onto this terrace garden where she encounters Dulcinea Septimus, the 7th necromancer. And Dulcinea fucking loves the captive listener. She's like perfectly happy for Gideon to be there completely silent. She's just sitting there spouting all sorts of things about her life and about how, you know, she would have loved to be a 9th nun. She thought it would be a terribly romantic way to die. And then she was like, ooh, but I can't do face paint.
She was so relatable.
I got like such great Gatsby vibes from this whole scene.
Yes,
where it's just
me
like,
too. Exactly the same.
Okay, tell me more.
well, it's just like I literally pictured her like out like on the terrace, like with like one of those like parasails basically, and like sitting in her chair, and it's like sunning herself.
Bowling a Daisy Buchanan.
She's just like tuberculosis, and she's like sitting out on the terrace, like in the sun, like, ah, yes, the woman has hysteria. Go send her to the garden and put her on a terrace and let her sit in the sun.
She's so like frail and translucently beautiful, and she needs help. And then she has this like very fluttery personality that like on occasion like zeroes in and like reminds you, oh, she's a little bit putting on an act here.
Right. She's like incredibly smart. Right. And she's pretty incisive and notices things, but she's so fucking charming. I am incredibly charmed by Dulcinea Septimus.
Yeah, me too.
As is Gideon, by the way.
Clearly.
Like Gideon is falling for it real hard.
Slow down, Nav. Slow down.
I feel like Dulcinea just invites you to be part of her fun little secret that she's telling you. Like you feel like you're part of it and she's looking at you.
What a scary, awesome, beautiful lady. Terrifying.
I want to draw our attention just like really briefly to something that she says that I think is interesting. And Gideon doesn't even totally know what to make of this. So maybe we can pick it apart a bit. but she says that the 7th makes ghosts nervous and that the 7th style of necromancy is the opposite of the 9th. The 7th is all about preserving body and the 9th is all about skeletons. And I don't know what to really make of that.
It sounds like they basically are like almost trying to cheat death, whereas the 9th house takes death and then gives it back life. Well, not life. Wait, what does that mean about the puppets? What does that mean about Harrow's mom and dad who are basically frozen in time?
Did we steal something from the 7th?
We're going to have to circle back to that. But I do want to like point out the other thing that Dulcinea does, which is to just instruct Gideon to do shit for her. She's just like having Gideon perform. She's like, Gideon, can I see your eyes? Like Gideon like pulls off her sunglasses. Marie, pull off your sunglasses. Ooh, those eyes though.
Lipochrome. I had to look that up.
Oh, what did you find out about lipochrome?
Fatty deposits in the eye that are yellow, but it causes amber eyes.
Ooh, amber.
Oh, you have eyes like gold coins. Yeah. So what do we know about Gideon now? She has red hair and like amber colored eyes.
Oh my God, she's a lion. And we know she's not from the 9th, which is absolutely something that I picked up on as Dulcinea is talking to her. It's like almost, is this like a way that like you can even place genetics of like, because presumably if you're on the same planet for several generations and you are part of this house, you will end up having like your own sort of like pathway. So who is the ginger-haired house with yellow eyes?
Honestly, it is shocking that the 7th house is the only one that has serious recessive disorders running through it, because there must be crazy inbreeding in like every single house.
Nice.
The other thing that she has Gideon do is draw her sword, and Gideon is like posturing a little bit, showing off a little bit, and fucks up. Ends up holding it in the way you would hold a two-hander, and Dulcinea sees it and calls her on it. It is exactly that shit where you forget that Dulcinea is watching and is paying attention because she seems so fluttery and fun.
So hot.
Think about it. How much did Dulcinea figure out in this? Dulcinea at this point absolutely knows that Gideon is not from the 9th and is not supposed to be the Cav.
Well, at least knows that she's very used to a big one. I don't think that it's like clear that she knows that she's not supposed to be the Cavalier.
I think she suspects that she really isn't supposed to be the Cavalier because Cavaliers train with rapiers.
Or maybe if it is part of the thing where it's like your Cavalier is going to be like, that is a role that is passed down through like highly ranked people, and obviously you're an outsider, then I can see that starts to kind of click together.
Yep. So it's like very much like, who are you?
Master deductive reasoning, Sherlock Holmes, Dulcinea.
We're getting there because we're about to talk about Coronabeth again, but it's really funny that essentially a lot of the characters we meet are like disarming in a certain way, but also like very, very smart. Dulcinea with like her like, I keep thinking of like 1920s now with her, I don't even know what the right word is for what I'm looking for, but like she's just obviously very, very intelligent and insightful, but like gives off like a devil may care attitude. And like that's very disarming. And then Coronabeth is obviously described as just like smoking hot, also very intelligent. And I feel like Magnus in like a way is also like has like good people skills, but like he gives off dad energy, and so that's also like disarming as hell. So like so far, a lot of people we meet are like dangerous, but also just like they could be dangerous.
There's nobody else around that are the Harrowhark and the Gideon of the group.
Yes,
right. Everybody else is inviting you in, and you know, like very warm and welcoming, politician style.
Well, it's very indicative of everybody else has people training. Everybody else has like some sort of sense of politics.
But I would argue, I think Harrow does have like a sense of politics. It's just that she is leaning into the other side of it, where she's going to be so incredibly adherent to the aesthetic and so incredibly hostile. She's putting on an act too. But it's just in the opposite direction. Instead of being welcoming, it's like, look how fucking scary we are. Look at my teeth.
I don't know if I would say that that's political. I would say that that is terrified teenager.
Okay, that definitely, there's an aspect of that. But I think that Harrow really understands, like, for instance, she's so deeply concerned about making sure that everyone doesn't know that the 9th is falling apart. And I feel like that is a really political thing, that her goal is to put on exactly the show you expect. Because without that, then you really start to like invite questions that she cannot answer. Gideon freaks out a little bit, right, and goes off and practices her rapier a bunch, which is actually pretty fabulous because not long after, she goes for breakfast one day and Corona Beth.
The whole thing was just really funny. She like got super pissed that she got like basically caught out on something. She's like, I'm just gonna go to my room and like work on my sword swings for a while.
Pretty classic. I love this interaction between Corona and Gideon because Corona comes up and offers her hand and it's the opposite direction that it would be if she was asking Gideon to kiss it. You know what I mean? She's like, she offers it palm up. Gideon adds her hand and then Corona kisses Gideon's hand, which I think is like so coy and fucking ridiculous and over the top when you're talking about a black robe clad, face painted, sunglasses wearing silent monster.
Versus the Golden Princess.
Love it.
It's a good scene.
And so Corona Beth has organized this sparring match that she's pretty excited about, and Gideon goes with, which she wouldn't have done if Corona weren't so ridiculously hot. Which
Pretty privilege at its best.
and Corona uses it the right way sometimes on a good day. Okay, so she walks into this sparring room, and this is actually down by that tiled vestibule that we visited before.
And like some like yucky pool with stagnant water. Is that what we're expected to see? This is like the pool room next to the training room. And the pool apparently, I can't figure out if it's just foul smelling because they've never smelled chlorine before.
They do say chemical smelling at some point.
I picture this whole thing as like a hotel gym and then like pool area, basically. It's just, yeah, that's... And it's actually really interesting because how did the skeletons know to clean down there? Because it wasn't clean, and then like who asked the skeletons to go clean down there so they could start training? Like I had a lot of questions because it was all obviously dirty and gross and cobwebby the day before.
And why is there a pool?
I also love, by the way, that you guys picked up so quickly on the fact that it clearly is a pool, which it is. I don't think that's spoiling anything. I did not, because Gideon does not know what the fuck it is. She's like a pit in the ground and it's gross and it has ladders down. And I was like, what? Like,
yeah.
In my head and my heart, Corona Beth has walked in and is just organizing the entire first house. So she's been organizing cleaning Rhoda's. So that's what's happening in my headcanon is Corona walks in and is like, we should do something about this. Get the skeletons. Yeah. Okay, so past the pool room, you have this beautiful training room, and actually Magnus and Jean Marie are sparring. Nibirius is being a giant dickwad. And like, this is actually also one of my favorite moments because Nibirius is being a real fucking prick about Jean Marie, who is a knight. She's Sir Chatur. She's also 14, okay? She is 14 and she is holding a rapier and she is fighting Magnus, and Nibirius is just kind of like giving her grief, and Magnus does a whole like self-effacing and like, you know, oh, I would be honored to be beaten by someone from the famous Chatur, you know, line. And then as Jean-Marie turns away is like giving fucking glaring eyes at Nibirius, which I really appreciate. He's good dad. He's good dad. He's not her dad, but he's just good dad. Anyway, so I'll stop talking about the fifth. I just love the fifth. All right, so a duel starts. It's a duel between Gideon and Magnus. And in the first couple seconds, Gideon knows exactly how it's going to go. She's going to completely clean the floor with him. And indeed she does. It is over in 3 moves. You get the like background Jean-Marie going, 3 moves, Magnus. Just 3 moves. 3 moves, Magnus.
All I'm picturing now, thanks to you guys saying that they do their accents in French, right? A French accent, is like I'm just picturing like the Quebec folks, like from Letterkenny. It's like,
except, you know, with less flannel.
She's still wearing her freaking robes. And she
my
has
God.
knuckle knives as her offhand.
So this is, okay, so like as a new reader, what is happening here is we have heard a lot about like, oh, like Gideon's like pretty talented, but like everybody's constantly quashing her ego and just being like, I mean, you're fine. You're clearly the best here, but like, you're just fine. Like, don't expect to like win any bouts. Like everybody, and actually like, you know, expect it, because in reality, like the ninth has been so isolated that everybody's expecting that you're going to be shit anyway, because all you do is you guard a rock stone wall tomb situation. So nobody's expecting anything. And then she like just walks in and it's just like immediately it's just like, oh, she is apparently an absolute prodigy, even amongst other people. That's super cool, super exciting. You're like, yes, I was hoping this for her. I was really hoping this for her. Because I was totally expecting her to just get like her face in the ground, because they kind of like led us to believe that like she's good she's a big fish in a little pond, and now she's about to be thrown into a much bigger pond.
Well, and everyone's so worried about her taking up a new weapon, right? Like, she doesn't usually fight with the rapier, but she clearly is that good and that dedicated. And you're right. Like Lamine is constantly trying to like tamper her ego, but she is fucking brilliant. And I love the way Tamsin Muir writes her choreography for the fights, because I think that's a hard thing to pull off in print. Aside from fighting brilliantly, Marie's right. Like, one of my favorite things is, you know, everybody else is like taking off their jackets. She leaves on her sunglasses. She leaves on her robe, puts on these obsidian knuckle knives. I'm trying to imagine something scarier, because this for me is a moment when it pivots from like goth kid to like, oh shit, we are in trouble. Like,
that was one of my favorite ways, is like when she pulls out the knuckle knives, and everyone's just like, what the hell? Like, why does she have knuckle knives? Like, this is so weird. And then like the guy from the third is just like, it's like very much like, again, like, not like, who uses knuckle knives? And it's just like,
yeah, it's not elegant.
And Corona Beth says that they're terribly nasty.
She goes, that's hot.
Yeah, like somebody's like, that isn't that hot? And doesn't somebody say like, I wasn't even aware that was an option.
the way that I read it was just that he was dismissive of it because it's not the best way to fight, or it's not like the most, like, it's not the most optimal thing to do. It's like, I can't remember them ever being a viable option. Like, I would have never considered them because they're useless, or they're terrible, or they're like...
I got nose in the air of like, I would never use those. Those are a brawler's weapon. That's like bringing an axe.
That's what I was seeing too, was like very like, oh, like, how could you? Darling, please. And of course, though, okay, so Nuberius is like super fucking dismissive until the moment when Gideon just in 3 moves cleans out Magnus perfectly.
Yeah.
And so Nuberius immediately challenges her to a duel, which is just so like no fucking chill for someone who thinks...
Me next!
That's exactly how it happens. All right, so tell me a little bit, like, how did you feel about this second duel between Nuberius and Gideon?
I mean, they kind of set you up to be like, oh, well, she wins the first one. Either she wins the second one like a landslide, and now she's the coolest person in the house, and everybody's going to be extra freaked out because the super scary girl is actually really fucking scary and not just silent and creepy looking. Or she absolutely gets her face shoved into the dirt to, like, you know, create some sense of balance, because this is what we were told is going to happen, and now we're just going to learn that Magnus is actually kind of... I think we resurrected him in the Fuck, Marry, Kill, so I'm a little nervous for Magnus. Oh, we're fucking Magnus, Quinn.
Tell me more, Brooke.
He's Magnus. This is excellent. I mean, what she does is she does something in the middle, right? Which is she shows that they are actually perfectly on par, and then he has this one trick move that she wasn't prepared for, right? And that's so cool. So I had to go back and reread this because I got confused. So they're super on par. They're like stroke for stroke. She's like a little bit more on the defense than she wants to be. And she manages to defend, She gets her weapon. She gets disarmed. And she does it by also holding on to his rapier, like under her armpit or something is what the idea I got. Is like she's like literally like holding it under her armpit. And then with his other little like trident sword thing, which... had no idea what the trident was going to be when we were talking about offhand weapons, but apparently it's a dagger sword that just suddenly springs 2 extra blades.
I love his little 3-fold sword, and but being able to like really move it back and forth between its states, so you can use it as like a claw.
Nobody sees that coming.
It's incredible.
Gideon's like, oh, I should have seen that coming. He's like, really? Anyway.
Like, should you have? Yeah.
But she's like holding on to his rapier, like under her armpit is the idea that I get, in order to like keep herself from getting the death blow. And then she gets disarmed from her rapier. So she like smacks him in the face.
I think she headbutts him.
and then she levels her sword at his chest. Or no, how did that work out? Oh, she picks it back up and then she gets the touch. But then it's still, the award goes to the other guy. Because he, like, technically did the disarming. Yeah, and I guess that...
So, technically, like... I love this, because this is... It's not just that they're perfectly matched. You also really get a sense of their different styles, right? Mm-hmm. Like, Gideon is incredibly fast and really good at fighting. Nibirius comes off to me like a dancer. It
Yeah,
is
he doesn't
precise. It is fluid. It is exactly where each point is supposed to be. Never more, never less. But it is choreographed. Like the way that he fights is all operating within the system of this very careful duel. It's exactly what it's supposed to look like. And so he knows the rules, of course. And of course, Gideon does not know the rules. Like,
She goes to the touch, right?
exactly. One of the very first things we learn is that in the ninth, it's always to the floor, whereas here it's to the touch. And of course, she didn't know that being disarmed was something that should have ended the duel. And so when she gets disarmed, Nibirius is like, well, technically I won. But she beats him up pretty good. She headbutts him and then like actually gets the touch. And it is so much fun to see everybody's reaction to that. Babs is like, but I won. And everybody else is like, yeah, but she was better than you.
She even said, like, the move that he used to disarm her, like, wouldn't have killed her. It just would have chopped her up a good bit. So, like, he would have been the one who was dead in a fight with real things.
Yeah, it's so funny because he's just like a clockwork fighting machine. It's just like I chop and then I do this. He's like a flowchart fighter, right? Like it's just like this goes to this and then this connects to this and then I circle back and I start over again. And meanwhile, Gideon's like, yeah, I'm just gonna like fuck some shit up here.
Brawls.
Exactly. It's like you're gonna win the duel, but I'm gonna like cut your heart out, cut type of thing.
Yes. And I really love this quote from Marta. The ninth is the less able duelist. I say she is the better fighter. She fought to win. And I feel like that is like a fundamental difference between Gideon and maybe even between the ninth and everybody else there. Everybody else is doing their normal life, their politician thing, their ruling thing, their like parties, whatever. The ninth is fucking clawing its way out every moment, just trying to stay alive. Like you always fight to win on the ninth. You don't have room to fight for like cute little accolades, you know?
I feel like it's very much like there's always, it doesn't matter like what you're doing, if it's like sport or dance or art or something, there's always a difference between the technicians and the talent. And every so often you have somebody who is like the perfect marriage of both. But this is very definitely like something where you have like raw talent that has been honed a bit with technique, but not fully. And you also have just raw honed technique.
Right.
And everybody acknowledges that, yeah, if you just have that much raw talent that has been given enough technique, like, okay, yeah, you are technically better.
And I really appreciate, though, that like people do notice it, because I expected everybody to be kind of on like the third side. But my favorite is Jean-Marie, maybe, who's like this 14-year-old who's like, yes, that's what I fucking want. I'm going to be a goddamn cool-ass cultist with my aviators, and I'm going to fucking stab the shit out of people.
Yeah, she changed her mind. No, don't say I'm overwhelmed. I want to be that. I'm overwhelmed.
Wait, real quick. The one thing I want to point out is just like you cut too much is said by multiple people. And I feel like that's like, again, a heavy sword thing, right? Like heavy, like you're chopping, right? As opposed to like being
Parrying.
like rapier versus a big ass sword. Like you're chopping too much. And I feel like that might be foreshadowing. I don't know. But like people can clearly see that like her style is not.
It's not how you would
polished.
fight with a rapier.
Yeah, exactly.
But here's the thing. I feel like everybody just assumes that the ninth was going to be terrible. So it can always be dismissed. Like, Dulcinea is smart enough to make the connection that this might be because she does something else. Everyone else is like, oh, she's just not technically trained enough. All right, well, that's our duels.
Oh, well, Harrow's watching, right, the whole time, right?
Oh, I
Just
forgot
very
about
briefly.
that. At the very end, Gideon looks up, right, and Harrow is there watching.
Do you think it's approval? Do you think it's
Yeah.
like, you shouldn't have been doing that? Like, what do you think?
This is the first time we're seeing Harrow since we showed up.
Yeah.
Like outside of like the 2 hours that she's sleeping at night, apparently.
We had you read 3 chapters this week, and Harrow is not in them except for this last sentence. It's intriguing. That about wraps it up for chapters 9, 10, and 11. But don't worry, because the sparring continues. I wanted more duels in this week's game. Interstitial. Ninth calves are necro suitcases.
Dear listener, before we begin this week's game, we must issue a correction on last week's game. Last week, our resident bone witch extraordinaire, Hannah, suggested that hyenas have a bowbellum, or clitoral bone. As a D&D rules lawyer, she would like to point out that she said, I only know about hyenas, but not what she knew about hyenas. In fact, hyenas do not have a bowbellum, only a massive clitoral pseudopenis that, yes, they must give birth through. No, I don't know how that works for impregnation. I do know that walruses apparently have the largest bowbellum, which makes sense as male walruses also have the largest baculum, up to 24 inches long. Now that's a bone zone.
This week we thought we'd keep the tournament going in a game we are calling Who Wielded It Best? So this week we're going to ask our hosts, who are, of course, trained fencing commentators, to predict the outcome of a couple of sparring matches. And because Gideon so adroitly recognized Nibirius's disarm as the famous fencing move, two crows drinking water, or possibly the boy strangles the goose, we've asked our host to also tell us the name of the winning move in each case. So here we go. I'm gonna start with John. John, who wins in a fight between Magnus Quinn and a terrier? And what is the final move?
Well, first off, I would just like to say that the boy strangles a goose is definitely a masturbation reference. Like, that is absolutely, like, just
really?
a dirty joke.
No way that it's not.
Well, see, now I can't see two crows drinking water also feels like it could be something.
No!
Anyway, I think, honestly, just given off the dad energy of Magnus Quinn, he's going to pretend he doesn't like the terrier for the first few months, and then you, like, by the end of the duel, the terrier's just, like, sitting on him while he's in a recliner, and he's petting the terrier.
I think the terrier has won that one, hasn't
Yeah,
it?
and the terrier wins.
They both win. They're both best friends now.
Yes.
Okay.
And the terrier wins with the final move, the long con.
Ooh, very good. We love it. Very, very good. All right, Brooke, who wins in a duel between Nibirius Turn and Mikhail Baryshnikov?
Let's see. We have Nibirius, who is, like you said, a dancer style. He is all technique, all small, little, fine, precise motions. Clearly, really good stabilizers. Baryshnikov has all those stabilizers and then power. Have you seen that man launch himself into the air?
Oh yes.
My lord. I think Baryshnikov gets him. And let's see, what's the name of his final move? I think it's something like Soviet tete-a-tete.
Very good. Soviet tete-a-tete. It's not just a tourgite. It's like
Epic. A Soviet tourgite would be, can you imagine that in slow-mo?
Oh, actually. Oh. All right, Tamsin, you're going to have to write that in next time. All right, Marie. Here's a one for Marie. Who wins in a fight between Gideon and Brienne of Tarth? And what is the final move?
It is actually a draw. It is a draw. Because the final move was they fight to a draw and then they decide to just arm wrestle for it.
And then they kiss. Sorry.
And then they kiss.
They arm wrestle. That's their duel.
And that's how they end.
So cute. That's so cute.
Okay, but what is the name of our final move?
I just told you they arm wrestle. They don't got time. Can you imagine either
It's the kiss.
one of them?
The final move is the kiss.
The final move is the kiss. They are not naming any moves.
You are absolutely right. They are
not
naming
memorizing
moves.
any moves. They are not reading any books that have named moves.
See, this kind of technical know-how. This is why we have Marie. Amazing. That was incredible. Great commentary. All right, so all of you now, I would like us to work on a really complicated one. So who wins in a fight between a bear and a lion, but they both have to fight with rapiers?
I mean, neither one of them have thumbs.
Can I have a clarifying question? What kind of bear? What bear is best?
You're right. This is a really complex one because I went straight.
Sun bear.
Sun bear. Ooh, that's a good one. I feel like that would be
my
the
white whale.
best at being able. Your white whale.
That's a sun bear. Yeah.
Wait, you want to kill a sun bear?
The first 7 times we went to the San Diego Zoo, the sun bear was never out. So like I didn't get to see the sun bear until we were actually about to leave San Diego. Like we went to the zoo one last time and I finally saw the sun bear and I finally got to like catch my white whale. But every time we went there, the sun bear was like chilling or sleeping or doing anything. So it just became a running joke that I never got to see the sun bear.
Well, now that you've seen it, what do you think? That versus a lion.
I think the lion beats the sun bear. I think a lion loses to like a polar bear or a grizzly bear. Like the size difference is too much. But like sun
But
bears
they're
aren't
armed
that big.
with rapiers.
Yeah, it's all about the rapier. And I'm convinced,
Yeah, but it's also about
I feel
the
like
offhand.
a bear would be, you're right, oh my god, the offhand. Is the offhand just their paw?
Yeah, absolutely, and claws.
Oh, well, it's still the bear. The bear has bigger paws.
But the cat has longer claws.
Bear claws.
Are delicious.
I thought a sun bear was kind of small.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's not a sun bear. Sun bear loses, but grizzly bear, polar bear, I think wins.
I gotta tell you, vibe-wise, I feel like the lion would be like more technically trained with a rapier. Like, the lion's got more of a Nibirius kind of style of
Yeah,
background.
bears are brawlers and lions are dancers. Yeah.
The first thing that I imagined when you proposed this was Baloo was the bear.
Oh, I really like that actually. And the final move in this fight is just called the San Diego Zoo.
The unexpected snake.
Surprise snake!
That's also a dirty joke.
What?
All right, well, we do have a lot more of Canaan House to explore, so we should probably get out of here before Nibirius Turn trips over his own ego and smothers us to death with his perfectly gelled hair. But please do join us next time on Who Wielded It Best. It's now time to ask our beautiful newbies about the depths of Canaan House that they haven't yet seen. Yes, it is time for rampant speculation. Act 3. QED, it's a conspiracy. Well, Nibirius may be a prick, but he's right about one thing. There's definitely a lot going on that we don't understand. And that's why we've asked our terrible teens to share some conspiracy theories. So, Brooke and John, what the fuck is happening?
John, I want to know what you're thinking.
I think Harrow's doing some secret sneaky shit that no one else is aware of. Like she's just like flitting around in the background while everyone's doing politicking and everything, and she's using that to just explore the house, figure things out, maybe try to find some more forbidden knowledge.
Yeah, we definitely get the idea that there is a couple people who seem to know more than we do. Like, I think you're right. Like, it's unclear whether or not Harrow is actually doing something. Because we got exposed to the idea that she had, like, a couple other ideas about what was going on when she was talking to Aglamene at back on Pluto. But there's also Dulcinea and what's her calf's name?
Protessalauus.
And something about, like, it is shut. So, like, are they looking for a specific door out of the multiplicity of doors? There are things that it seems like some people might know more than we do currently, right? I think you're picking up on that one, John.
Yeah, my other conspiracy theory is that the Emperor is on the planet somewhere because they keep commenting about how good these skeletons are. And like even the ninth house is like very impressed. Ninth house is supposed to be the people that do the skeletons, and even they're like, holy crap, these are incredible skeletons, and they're not cheating with like. I think it's hilarious that people like cheat by putting tendons on them, or like basically like performance enhancing, like skeleton enhancing things. And everyone just keeps talking about how good these skeletons are, and who could be better at that than it's got to be the Emperor or teacher. Maybe the teacher is the Emperor. That's my current conspiracy theory, perhaps. The skeletons are so good, and somebody's raising the skeletons and having them be really sophisticated, and we don't know who that is yet.
I also picked up on the kind of conspicuous absence of teacher, and yeah, that's a theme that they keep poking at, is these really good skeletons. Interesting idea that I agree that maybe the Emperor made them. Like, he's probably the best necromancer, like theoretically. If he's, well, I guess first in class and best in class are not always the same thing, but. There's one other conspicuous theme that I am super excited about, which is all these references to Nonius, the ancient legendary Ninth House Cavalier. And I'm wondering if like maybe we're going to get a whole sort of like history repeating itself since we're doing the whole lictor replacement. We're talking about a legendary Ninth Cavalier. I don't know what's happening exactly. Like, we're kind of left in limbo, right? Like we're here to become lictors, but also no instructions. And now people are just starting to do stuff. I think that it's notable that we were given some advice by a teacher at the beginning saying, like, your success and your calf's success are the same. And now I'm wondering if it's like, the idea is to create a team of like 8 lictors plus calves. Like maybe the intention is that they actually are able to all kind of like work together. And this is, instead of being forced into these situations, they work it out amongst themselves or not.
Well, I guess we'll see if any of that happens next time when John and Brooke join up with us again to explore the many doors and decrepit mysteries of Canaan House in Gideon the 9th, chapter 12. I do want to remind you, dear listeners, that next week we are doing just one chapter. That's chapter 12.
Aww.
Oh, sucks to suck, Brooke and John. We'll see you next time.
If you, dear listener, are like Brooke and John, reading along for the first time, make sure you find our reading calendar on our website, frontline5th.podbean.com, or follow us on Instagram or TikTok, which are both linked in the show notes. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends and give us a 5-star rating anywhere you can. And if you didn't like it, feel free to lie. Now let's head off to sleep, my fellow baby necros, because Mommy and Daddy have some deep spoilers to discuss.
Get in, losers. We're going speculating.
Spoiler warning. This portion of the podcast is 98% spoilers and 2% snickering.
Seriously, we will spoil anything and everything in the series up through Nona the 9th. If that's not what you want, turn back now. Necrolord Prime, but there's a lot of spoiling to get to. Marie, shall we?
Yes.
Act 4. Fix your face, idiot. Hey, Queen, you look fucking amazing. It also was just fucking hilarious because I didn't know you were doing it. And so you signed on and it was like,
I was sure that you were going to figure it out from the text message. I said, perfect that you're running 5 minutes late. For promotional material purposes, could you make sure that you were Zoom recording before I turn on my camera?
Hysterical.
Big eyes.
I literally did not see this text message because it didn't load onto my computer until after I sent you the one where I was like, how are you doing? And I sent you, how are you doing? Because I was like, did she forget? I didn't know. Because
Now my face password does not recognize me. Excellent.
Of course it doesn't.
That is even funnier that you did not get the message. And you're just like, where is she?
It's incredible.
Okay.
I'm really excited to chat with you this week. It's 3 chapters where you get to meet the whole cast, not the whole cast, but you get to meet a lot of people. And we know a lot about them. Our newbies don't know a ton about them. Who do you want to start with? Should we talk with Dulcinea?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So one of the things that I noticed this time is Dulcie asks her to take off her glasses, which is, I think, a weird thing to do if you don't already know that the eyes are going to be important. Or is Dulcinea just obsessed with eyes for obvious reasons?
I struggle with this one because I actually went and looked to be well, at some point she makes an exclamation about Gideon being redheaded or something. And I looked it up and it's way past here. And she says something like, oh, you're a ginger.
We know that this is not something that she's necessarily already super clocked, because you're right. Having red hair is not a 9th phenotype.
Right. So
yeah.
I think as soon as she sees her, that's the thing too, is I'm like, well, maybe it's just that she's a little kind of doing detective work on everybody anyway, because she came here with a specific purpose. I think that that's maybe what it is.
Yeah.
Is she just wants as much information as possible. So she's like, I want to see your eyes. I want to see, because you can't tell what people look like with face paint on, and she's all covered up, so you can't see her hair.
But it is also remarkable because the second those glasses come off, she knows. And she keeps her cool in a beautiful way. It's very different than, say, in Harrowhark the 9th, when Mercy sees her eyes, when it's actually Gideon's eyes there, she fucking loses her shit.
But also, I think Mercy seeing the eyes is possibly even more shocking, because at that point, it is seeing Harrow's Cavalier's eyes.
Yes.
And seeing the switch. And then putting together the plan that she tried to get to happen. And then knowing, because Mercy never saw Gideon.
No. Mercy never saw Gideon. You're completely right. And it also, but this is interesting because it makes me wonder if Cytherea was in on that plan. Because the intimation has been basically that it was a Mercy and Augustine plan to plant Wake's baby as a, waken God's baby as a way to get through the locked tomb. And I don't know that Cytherea was part of that. But Cytherea definitely, she's been planning shit. And she definitely knows that they are Alecto's eyes. Like, that is absolutely something that she immediately recognizes. Or not Alecto's eyes, rather, John's original eyes.
That she has to have put that together, but then it's like, because that's the only reason that she would write "you lied to us." But that also makes me wonder, when did she write "you lied to us"?
Okay, so this actually goes to the next thing. So Brooke noticed this, that Pro says it's shut when he comes out to visit her on the terrace, and I assume that he's talking about the specific door that she locks with like a clot of everlasting bone, perpetual bone, right? Which is the last room that they end up finding Ianthe in. And I feel like that is the room where she writes "you lied to us" on the wall.
Which is her room.
It's her room. Yeah. So I feel like that's actually something that she visited basically day one and locked up very early on.
So did she write "you lied to us" day one?
I mean, her whole reason for being down there is out of fury towards the Emperor for his failures. I think they already all know in their hearts that he's lied to them about some fundamental, important fucking shit. She loves the Emperor, but she is trying to take down the Emperor from the get-go. And that means she has to know some degree that he has lied to them about the most important thing that they've ever done.
Yeah, this is weird. I think we're going to have to revisit this, because now all of my memories of like what happens at the end of Gideon and what Cytherea's motivations were is getting kind of muddled, because it was also just, a lot of it was her being literally insane over dying for 10,000 years and living with the grief
of the loss of her cavalier, the loss of Loveday for 10,000 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that certainly is an enormous component of it, but it is targeted to the Emperor, right? Her goal is to bring down the 9 houses such that the Emperor will have to come back to this place that is dangerous.
Specifically to have him end, even if it ends the 9 houses.
So, I mean, it's not just a general like going insane and lashing out at everything. It is very much about him and what he has forced her to go through. And you're right that maybe "you lied" comes directly out of seeing Gideon's eyes and knowing that he lied about the lictorial process. And that it initially may have been something as simple as just expecting her to be okay with slowly dying continuously for 10,000 fucking years, a myriad of pain. That's a tough one. I also, this is nothing, but like in terms of notes that one leaves, right? So like this episode, we talked about Harrow's passive aggressive notes, which are my favorite. And I should have told everyone this, but I once had a landlady when I was living in this tiny little room in her house in France, because I was working there for a summer, and she would leave me passive aggressive post-it notes about how long my showers were, which, by the way, she would time them and leave the like number and be like, "please conserve water." And it was like 15-minute showers. It's not like I was in there for like an hour. They were like reasonable fucking amounts of time. Anyway, long way to go for that. But I also love that Cytherea has been like leaving notes in sort of like big bloody style letters, like when she's like, "Det the 4th, sweet dreams." And it just seems, it's not even unhinged. It's just so fucking childish in this weird way that makes no sense to me.
Like, it absolutely does make sense to me if it's just like a complete emotional outburst, and you have like, if you could actually like write a furious emotional note 4 feet high in blood, sometimes, wouldn't you?
Sometimes you need that. This is like really what therapy is just being able to like in blood write down "fuck your face." Like,
yeah, 4 feet high in blood.
Yes,
like if you could, wouldn't you?
Yes, you're absolutely right. I take back everything I said. This is completely on point. You're there. Okay,
Cytherea did nothing wrong. You heard it here first.
All right, we will get back to Cytherea as we keep going along through this, I'm sure, because Dulcinea's actions and Cytherea's actions in this are super, super intriguing. Do you want to talk
also, the whole thing about Pro coming back and saying it's shut it brings up a lot to me of like, was this like a thing that Tamsin came back to and was like, maybe that was just like a weird little way that I wrote that. Does it have a purpose? Was that Dulcinea putting on an act with Pro, or does it say something about his autonomy and the way that she's piloting him around? Because it's very specifically that Harrow always speaks for her parents and has given them a vow of silence. And I don't remember like she ever tried to make them talk as meat puppets.
We have no idea whether or not she did. We know that the vow of silence is like a new thing that she did for them as she was leaving because she presumably couldn't be there. But actually,
no. She locked them. She locked them away.
She locks them away. Right. You're right.
Because
she did give them a vow of silence.
But she gave them a vow of silence very early on because it's too hard to make them talk. Right.
Yeah.
And remember, like way further on in Nona, when John is talking about
Ulysses and Titania,
not even them, when he's talking about the government that wants them to meet puppet their like president or prime minister or whatever, he's saying, well, if I have to do complex speeches, I'll have to be there.
Yes, this makes perfect sense to me. And that you can't. So actually, one of the things that's like emphasized in these chapters is these skeletal constructs. And we learn much later that really the reason they're so good is because they are in fact whole people, whole souls. That's why they're able to do such complicated things. It's just that their bodies have decayed. And in contrast, obviously the meat puppet style is very much a situation where it is not autonomous, where you can do basic tasks, but like you have to assign them tasks, and being able to like respond back and forth in a press conference, not something you could do unless you were there and actually could do it in real time. So I think you're right about that. I will say that the difference between Harrow's parents and Pro is that
Harrow was 10.
Seventh house. Harrow's 10. The seventh house has been perfecting this, and Cytherea's Electra. Exactly. So all of this is kind of
but also why say it's shut?
Sorry, this is why, and I think it's fascinating. I think it is notable that Protesilaus and Cytherea posing as Dulcinea actually get a key on their own. And the fact that like most of the time Gideon sees her out there reading romance novels on the terrace makes me wonder if it was a type of like trial that she could just send Pro to do himself and grab the key, or if they actually went down there and did it. And I could see it going either way, but it's unclear to me, you're right, how much autonomy, how much she really just sends Pro to actually do things, and how much Pro is just kind of like hiding in Cytherea's closet 90% of the time until she takes him out because she needs to look like she has a cavalier.
Right, because it's not like if you have a meat puppet, it's not like you can see through their eyes, right? It's not like he could go do something and then report back to her.
No. He could bring her things physically. And to be fair, she knows what all the trials are ahead of time because she was there, presumably, when they were being generated.
So, I just really don't get the purpose of saying it's shut other than a play act for Gideon.
All right, well, we'll come back to it. I want to talk a little bit about the third house. In our notes here, we have a funny little conversation back and forth. I asked you, I feel like this conversation between the three of them makes explicit that Ianthe is the only necro in the family. And I asked whether you figured it out at this point.
No, I never figured it out until Ianthe at the very end is like giving her villain monologue. And I was like, what? It was all there. This makes so much sense.
I figured this out immediately from this chapter, and I was so confused the entire time. So like there's a part later on when they're talking about which twin to look out for, and Harrow is like the tall one, which obviously means Corona. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? First of all, necromancers are always these weak, flimsy things. You should just be pointing to the weak, flimsy one no matter what. But secondarily, I mean, Harrow's not there for this conversation. I felt like this was so explicit. They're sitting there talking about how Corona's really happy that there isn't a lot of necromantic theorems to do. And Ianthe's like, yeah, because you would suck at it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and looking back at it, you're just like, oh, you're such a dumbass for not getting that.
No, this was the only thing that I ever figured out in real time in the book. I missed so many other things, and for whatever reason, I was like, yes, I've got you, J'accuse. It was this part where Ianthe says it's not a good idea to attract the attention of the necromancer of the third house. Anyway, like, apparently Brooke and John didn't get it either. They were. Yeah. I was trying not to hint.
Yeah, it is so explicit. It is so explicit. It's so funny. I never got it. I never figured it out until she did her villain monologue.
We learn a lot of little bits and pieces about different people.
And I also think it's really funny because it makes it seem that during the duel that Corona is like this rogue necromancer, like flitting about with the Cavaliers, and it's
She's like dallying
no.
with the Cavaliers while the
It's
necros
like,
do
no,
boring shit.
there are no necromancers there.
Yes, that's exactly right. It is literally all Cavaliers, because Corona easily could have fucking been the Cavalier of the third house. There's not a single necromancer there. And yeah, Corona's always, it's a little sad. All the necromancers are hanging out together in the library, and Corona only hangs out with the Cavaliers. And it's like this, I don't know how to explain it. It just feels, anyway, okay, it's fine. We're gonna walk past it. Oh, I will say this. I really do think that Corona is more interesting than people give her credit for. I think she's so funny. Even like all these little coy things, her love of dad jokes, her like immediate laughter when Magnus says that he
Cavalier primary. And Corona is like, this is amazing, and like immediately laughs, and like Gideon is like secretly like, I've got to write that down later.
Exactly, because Gideon fucking loves a dad joke. She assumes puns are automatically funny. I have two more things that I want to talk about a little bit. We've gone over my obsession with Canaan House, but in this particular one, there's a lot of explicit things where they talk about, for instance, modern conveniences haphazardly pasted atop ancient riches. There's this fountain of fresh water ringed in old concrete with a filtration tank next to it, right? It's this combo of things. And part of what I think is interesting about this, I think we talked about it last time. I think that the facility part was literally potentially the facility where Jod and Gideon OG and Mercy and Augustine were actually building this technology to kind of keep people in stasis, and where the original necromancy starts. But the larger Canaan House obviously gets built after that and is this like elaborate, rich, weird place. We talked about it maybe being in the river a little bit. What I think is interesting is that I feel like there's this intimation that someone in the last 100 years or whatever came in and put in modern conveniences.
Yeah,
on
but
top
see,
of all this.
I don't think it's like the last 100 years. I think it's like it took like there's like this almost like hint that the lictoral process, like figuring out the lictoral process, took 1,000 years.
I mean, they really do say, right, that he hasn't been back there in 9,000 years. And we know it's a myriad. So you're right. There's this 1,000-year gap where it really took time for them to, that's interesting. So, and over those 1,000 years, you go from being, you know, all of this Victorian stuff, you're getting more and more space stations up and running. So you start putting more spacey things in, and you end up with a Sonic in the bathroom right next to the bathtub.
Yeah. I think it's a case of like, you know, kind of like Rome. You know,
built on itself. You kind of like, you're constantly adding layers to it. And actually, you're constantly cannibalizing old parts of it to build up new parts of it.
Yeah. It's just like these incredibly ancient cities where it's just like, you know, you have something from 1000 AD and it's right next to
something that someone built today. Like, yeah, 100%. And so obviously, like, one of the old things that's truly there are the lictoral labs. And I am obsessed with the doors. Like, this description of the doors is so elaborate. And I have no idea what it means, but I see your face right now, so I think you do.
I do. So the first thing you think of is you're like, okay, the skulls, like the snakes. You're like, that is absolutely a snakes. It's absolutely laurels.
Yes.
Across the lintels. The thing that really got me was the 5 circles connected by lines. I was like, the fuck? Right.
Yeah.
And you know, there's animal skulls and you're like, it's got to be cows, maybe, considering Nona.
Sorry, I went straight to like hardcore interesting antelope. I went to oryxes because you know I love an oryx. Like, yeah.
Yeah, something like that or whatever. Okay, but whose lab do we know this is? We know this is the second house lab.
Right.
Okay. The second house is the cohort. The cohort is the military, which is also
so far
on Mars.
Okay.
Mars is the god of war.
Mm-hmm.
Mars is the god of war in Roman mythology.
Aries. Oh my fucking god. Fuck you. That's genius. I love you so much. That is incredible.
Okay, keep going for the rest of the class. What are the skulls?
The Greek god of war is Ares. Ares is also like goat, ram's horn, like the
constellation and the astrological sign.
is.
So go look up the astrological like sign and the
Oh my God.
constellation Aries.
So the constellation itself, the 5 dots connected, is the constellation. And then you have these animal skulls next to it that is Aries. That's amazing. Can I tell you where I went, which failed immediately?
Yes.
I was like, perhaps it is Braille, and it's like the number for each one. And I went and I looked it up, and I was like, no, it's not that.
Well, and so now I don't remember what the other labs look like. I do
Yeah.
remember that all of the keys have colors associated with them. Like she
Yes.
went like full Hogwarts house.
Colors and styles as well, because like some of them are like more like the 6th house looks like it's gonna open a cabinet. You know, it's very utilitarian.
It's like gray and utilitarian. I remember that the 2nd house is red.
Yes.
I think the 3rd house one is like gold and curly Q. I don't remember what the doors look like for everything.
No, well, but that's because actually
I don't know if they're
Gideon-
described.
Gideon only sees a couple of the doors because Harrow goes off and looks at most of the Lictor labs on her own, actually.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Sorry. I'm so excited about the Aries thing, which I can't believe I didn't put that together. And now I'm looking at your notes and it's all here. And I now feel like my freak out was like a little bit over the top.
So I do have to give credit because I was sure, I was like, there's gotta be something here where I'm gonna feel really stupid when I get there.
Yeah.
So I did have help with this. It wasn't completely me. And I went and like looked up
That's
on
what Reddit
forums
is
and things.
for.
That's what Reddit is for.
This is the joy of having a whole community of people who are deeply obsessed with conspiracies that are fictional, is all of us together are freaking the fuck out over it.
Yeah, but now it makes me wonder, like, if all of, like, do all of the planets have an astrological sign assigned to them? I think they do. Or many of them do. Not maybe all of them, but many of them do.
It's interesting. We definitely will have to like think about this. I know that the 7th house one is like 3 dots in a row. So we might be able to like we will work on this. We should figure this out and we can assign things outwards. For me, the snakes immediately, anytime you have like snakes slithering around vegetation, I go straight to Adam and Eve. So
right, the snakes kind of screwed it up for me because the only other thing I could think of was, and like kind of like that's where it falls apart is like when, although maybe not because we know that John was obsessed with like Roman aesthetics and mythology and lore and stuff, and so especially with the laurels,
yes.
The other thing is I forget what they're called, but it's kind of like the general, like also part of like Roman mythology are like these kind of like general gods or deities of like the house or the home.
Yeah.
Or like the protectors. They're associated with snakes.
Interesting. So I mean, and I took it, he does love the Roman shit, but he also does love the Catholicism shit. And so like there is so much of Catholicism in the religion that he's created for himself that there's a part of me that thinks about like Blood of Eden is the, you know, if you take that as like the Adams and Eves who started a new civilization after they were expelled from Eden, which is Earth, versus him staying there, and like the snake being this part of it that is both sinister, but also it's about knowledge, which he's all about, is about like building this knowledge that other people thought was forbidden, but he is like endorsing the forbidden knowledge and staying in Eden. I have fucking no idea.
Who knows? He was a
we're gonna have to keep going. I am gonna create a murder board.
You keep saying, you keep threatening.
Okay,
and
it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen tomorrow afternoon. Act 5. See you next time, my little nunlets. We are all pretty tired from exploring an infinite maze and poking each other with swords. So next week, we're just reading 1 chapter. That's right. We will be going down into the depths in chapter 12. If you want to follow along with us, our reading calendar is available on our website at frontline5th.podbean.com. And you can follow us on Instagram and TikTok, which are linked in the show notes. If you enjoyed this podcast, please tell your friends and give us a 5-star rating anywhere you can. And of course, if you did not enjoy the podcast, feel free to lie. So with that, I'll just remind you not to unlock any tombs or enter any doors without permission because, you know, ghosts. Bye! Frontline Fifth is a Locked Tomb podcast conceived by Marie Adamako and starring Marie Adamako, Hannah Grunwald, Brooke Anderson, and John Ryan. Our cover art was designed and created by Marie Adamako, who also edited this episode. Our fabulous music was composed and recorded by Blake Anderson. The Locked Tomb series is a completely dope-ass book series by Tamsin Muir, who does not know we exist and is in no way affiliated with this podcast.